Welcome, I'm Lisa, plant life artist in residence. I'm so honoured to be in this position to share this online tutorial with you, inspired by a recent trip that I took to Jones Hill Farm and looking particularly at the green-winged orchid. This tutorial is all about capturing that wild and free feeling of wild flowers. This is not about perfection. This is explorative, this is fun, this is playful, and we're going to be playing with something called the wet on wet technique. I'll explain a little bit later on about the equipment that you need for this tutorial, but relax and enjoy some footage from my recent trip to the beautiful Jones Hills Farm. This is Jones Hill Farm, the Coronation Meadows, and these are green-winged orchids and a field of buttercups. I was so happy painting in this special place. Looking really close at the green-winged orchid, you can identify it by the green veins and the translucency of the wings. This one is a gorgeous plummy purple, and this one, rarer, is a light, delicate pink. I love sitting in these spaces and really absorbing and immersing myself in nature. That is an important part of my practice. Watching the gentleness of the breeze as it moves the grasses. I love to create out in nature, and here are some of the pieces I collected at Jones Hill Farm on the day. Let's take a moment and enjoy this short piece of footage of a wildflower coronation meadow and the green-winged orchid. Welcome to my painting table. As you can see, I'm a bit of a messy worker in the best possible way. For this tutorial, you need a selection of watercolours. I have some pan watercolour here. You may have liquid watercolour or tube watercolour. Whatever you have is fantastic. Let's play with that. Jar of water, selection of brushes, a couple of different widths and shapes, and importantly, a cocktail stick. This is an amazing art tool. You can always use the end of your brush if you don't have a cocktail stick. You might want to have a pencil handy. For this, and watercolour paper, most importantly. This is a really lightweight, thin watercolour paper that I'm using, but it can hold quite a lot of water. And I'm just going to tint my water for demonstration purposes. Oh, look at that wonderful tumble. Because the wet on wet technique uses lots of water. We really embrace the flow and the water element in this tutorial. I'm excited. I'm going to begin by swatching out some of these pan watercolours that I have. I have quite a few different colours here. However, if you just have one or two colours, that's also amazing. Really do work with what you have. I'm here as your guide. However, I really love it when you completely ignore me and go off piste and do your own thing. It's that creative intuition that we're searching for within this tutorial, that wild and free way of painting, and a lot of that means listening to your gut. So if you have a couple of colours, then work with those, see what happens, what experiments can you go off to, and yeah, really have fun and play. I love the water element, and when I paint I really don't want control. over my painting. It's an opportunity for me to really release, let go, and let the paint flow. And I've already started to splatter accidentally on my page. I've got a few different colours here, varying degrees of purple and pinks and a little deep blue. I'm going to keep going with this one. I think it's an indigo. And I really like to see how they're going to work on the page and merge into each other. We're going for that raspberry, that plum, all the fruits are like the paints to sound delicious, that rich purple colouring. So a mixture of the pinks, the purples and blues would be great. But because it is the green-winged orchid, we are also going for a few bits of green. So again, swatching up some of the greens, just letting them serendipity do its thing, inviting those happy accidents. And I've already got something quite lovely appearing here, and this is just my colour swatches. But by doing something like this, which is fast and splatty and movement based, that does help release and free me up. And if you're feeling a bit tight in the hands, just give them a shake out. Give them a little sprinkle. Sometimes I like to dip my fingers in the water and give a little sprinkle on the page, just to really embrace that water element. The wet on wet technique is where you put water down and then you add more water in. And I want us to go for puddles, the sort of page that's going to rock and roll across our paper. Looking at the green-winged orchid, there is lots of orchids, they cluster around a single stem and they have a hood which is lined with these green veins. They have narrow pointed leaves. So those are a few of the things we're going to be aiming for. But to start with, we're going to create an ish shape, really large, in the middle of our page, anywhere on the page. So my ish shape is kind of like a really loose hooded M over the top. And this is our hooded leaves where we're going to add some of those green veins too. And then down the centre, underneath, we have this beautiful fluted petal. Again, this is ish shapes we're inspired by. And this time it's almost like a little wavy line. This centerpiece, if you want to pause or reverse back any of the video so you can see an orchid, then please do. Now we've got this really big face on, bold, confident green-winged orchid in an ish shape that's super wet. You can see on the page I'm sprinkling there. I don't mind even adding a little bit more because I haven't stretched my paper, then it's a bit wibbly wobbly, but for today that's fantastic. I'm going to start to build up that colour, so really load up the colour on my brush. That squeaky noise is Mabel, my puppy in the background, just woken up from a nap. I'm going to start to build some of that colour in the centre. And I'll really sprinkle it on, you know, allow that brush to be wild and free, playful. I'm starting off with a pink and I love the tumbles. I love allowing the pigment to swirl around. Loading up with another colour. Ooh, look at how that reacted. That was pretty fantastic. Nice deep purple running through the centre. And letting the colour spread, move around, inviting those beautiful oops moments where I can just be in this place of freedom and flow. Starting to naturally slow down a little bit. I'm going for a darker pigment. If you have one pigment colour, then just keep loading up more with that same pigment colour. Now, one thing I loved was down the centre there was these beautiful spots and dots. So I'm just going to add a few of those now, but because this is really wet, they might not stay, and that is okay. This is process painting. So take the opportunity to slow down. You don't have to keep up with me. You can pause this tutorial, come back to it. and simply enjoy dropping some paint into that puddle. See how it's dispersing already, and this pigment's naturally starting to break up, so we've already got like a little blue ring around some of the colour droplets. I'm going to keep going over the top. I realise I've been quite chatty. That's because I'm so passionate and excited about watercolour. Every time I sit down to paint, it really is my happy place. But winding down the chat for a moment, I'm going to invite myself to become absorbed in this dotty spotty process. I'm picking up a different pigment or working with the same one throughout. You could do a whole page just of water and dots and look at how the pigments you have available to you start to interact, how they move. Creating with this darker indigo colour on the same place. I have no idea what that's going to dry like, but that is all part of the fun. Naturally, I am a perfectionist, so this gives me a real opportunity to release myself from that notion of perfectionism. Might even want to have a little play in some of the puddles. And spend a few minutes here creating, experimenting, playing with that splodgy technique. Remember, it's creative mess making at this point. I hope you enjoyed your splodgy centres. Mine have started to dry, and because different pigments like break out in different ways, it's really nice to spend a moment really looking close and then looking closer again, just like we can in nature. Now for our green-winged part of our orchid, waking up any green pigments that you have. I'm going to use a couple of different ones. And either using the end of your brush or a cocktail stick, I invite you to really roll that cocktail stick within the pigment that you have so it's fully covered. Now this is dried a little bit, so I'm not quite sure how it's going to react, but I can always add more water. That is the beauty of watercolour. And because this makes some lovely trail lines from the centre, I'm going to score a little bit of green, like a green vein on that hooded part of the orchid. Yeah, wonderful. It's really picking that up. So again, gliding line. They don't need to be uniform in nature. They're all different. Roll in that cocktail stick in the puddles and blazing a trail for that green pigment. I'm going to try a different colour on this side and work my way out from the centre again. You noticed I've swapped to my non-dominant hand. I sometimes do this, so I'm naturally left-handed. Sometimes paint with my right because it adds a totally different texture and way of working, really loosening that up. It can feel a bit weird to start with. I encourage you to give it a go. I've got two quite different depths on each side between using my left and right. And here we have our front facing, bold and strong, one singular, really focusing in green-winged orchid bud. Play with these techniques, that wet on wet, that puddle, that dropping of the pigment, those lines with the cocktail stick, and see where it takes you. Fill up the whole page. You could have a page of loads of orchid heads, or you could start to play with some singular little stems coming up with clusters around. Whatever you do, I really encourage you to have fun and find freedom in your painting. Thank you for joining me on this short online tutorial, all inspired by that beautiful orchid. No matter how you feel about your work, whether you love it or you want to throw it in the bin, remember all those feelings have value, and you start to work out what you like and what you don't like about the medium you're working with. So every time you sit down to paint, you are enjoying that process and you are on that journey. Thank you for supporting Mow May.